Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, and share buttons. Today we're going to talk about a number of headlines, both directly and indirectly related to Bible prophecy. So let's dive right in. This first one is from Big News Network. It's titled, "We Need a Single Global Order," says Macron at ongoing APEC Summit. French President Emmanuel Macron on Friday urged the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum for a single global order amid the U.S.-China trade conflict that had done damage by forcing other countries to choose sides. Macron made the plea in his keynote speech, navigating a turbulent world. "Are you on the U.S. or the China side?" was the question asked, said Macron, who added, "But we need a single global order." Macron described the current world order as a jungle, posing the US and China as two big elephants trying to become more and more nervous, reported the nation Thailand. The French leader urged the cooperation of a lot of other animals and calls for a single world order. So here we have a Western European leader calling for a single global order. The Bible tells us that the Antichrist, and I'm not saying Macron is the Antichrist by any means, I'm just saying that the Antichrist will come from among the people who destroyed the temple. We read that in Daniel chapter 9, and we know that those people were the Romans, so we would expect the Roman Empire, the Western European Roman Empire. Italy is part of the European Union. We would expect from that area, we would see the development of the Antichrist and his rise to power, as well as the single global order that the book of Revelation tells us that he will establish. So here we have a call for a single global order. But what's really interesting is in this article, we read about how he compares these nations and governments to animals, right? And where do we hear comparisons of governments, nations, totalitarian governments that trample people's individual rights? Where do we hear them compared to animals? Well, in the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation, such governments are described as beasts. So I find this very interesting that this is the language he's using to describe these nations. But here we go. We've got yet another call for a single global order, global government, globalism in general. We've seen these pushes going on for quite some time now, and it just continues. This is just the most recent example. So next story I want to tackle, this one's from Zero Hedge. It says, "German disaster official recommends stockpiling several crates of water and canned food." The head of Germany's Federal Office for Civil Protection and Disaster Relief, Ralph Tiesler, has warned citizens to prepare for short-term power outages, particularly in January and February, and to stock up on rations in advance. Now, why January and February? Well, talked before, as we go into the winter months in Europe, they're having to use more and more of their natural gas storage. And so we're going to end up seeing potential problems in those coldest winter months, and that's January, February. It says we have to assume there will be blackouts this winter. By that, I mean a regional and temporary interruption in the power supply. The cause will not only be energy shortages, but also the targeted temporary shutdown of the networks by the operators with the aim of protecting the networks and not endangering the overall supply. That said, some municipalities are not prepared, and despite German gas storage facilities being near capacity, experts don't think the stockpile will be enough to last the country through the winter due to a lack of new supply from Russia. Now, we've tackled that before in previous videos, maybe even just last week. I mentioned they talk about, well, we're at 100% storage capacity. So this is something different from what they've been saying, which is, we're going to make it through this winter. They're forecasting a winter that's not as cold as we thought, and we're going to be able to make it through. And we're at 100% storage of natural gas, our natural gas storage capacity is at 100%, right? That's what we hear. But we mentioned before that they're typically between 80 and 100% going into this part of the year, but that's with all of the Nord Stream pipeline flows from Russia continuing through the winter. So that 100% storage makes it sound like we have 100% of our needs stored for the winter. But that's not what it means. It just means that their storage capacity, which they use throughout the winter, with all of that extra pipeline, all those pipeline flows coming from Russia, that's enough. But without those pipeline flows from Russia, the storage capacity will quickly go away under normal circumstances. They're going to really have to curtail usage, which is why they're talking about blackouts. It says we expect short-term blackouts rather than long-lasting, large-scale blackouts. Now, again, we've encountered these types of words too in these official government statements recently, such as we expect, right? We expect short-term blackouts. But good preparation is important for that too, right? Meaning we don't intend to have widespread long-term blackouts. We don't expect. Be prepared if you live in Europe for large-scale, long-term blackouts. It says what to do: stock up. Primarily water, several crates, and canned food. That would be enough for 10 days. That's what my agency recommends. So I would recommend as much as you can possibly get your hands on, because 10 days just doesn't seem like a lot to me. And you can buy canned food that'll last 2-3 years longer. If you had the ability to get it, why wouldn't you get it? And then you can always use it later. But this is going to go on for quite some time, not just through this winter. Story goes on. It says, our message is prepare in the first place. Be prepared for possible crises. Don't assume that everything will be readily available all the time. He added, saying that residents should also purchase battery-powered radios and candles. So in other words, prepare yourself to go back in time 150, 200 years ago when you didn't have electricity, to where you need candles and you need stockpiles of food and you need access to clean, drinkable water. And prepare for that. And so again, when they say things like, we expect, or we don't plan, usually you need to anticipate the exact opposite is going to occur. That's how I would advise anybody living in Europe right now. Prepare yourself as much as possible, because 10 days doesn't seem like a whole lot. My dog Lucy agrees. You could hear her barking right there. So anyway, this goes on. Next story, this is from oilprice.com. It says how Europe's energy crisis could turn into a food crisis. We read on, it says runaway energy price inflation has wreaked havoc on European industrial activity, with the heaviest consumers taking the brunt. Aluminum and steel smelters are shutting down because of energy cost. Chemical producers are moving to the United States. BASF is planning a permanent downsizing. We've talked about all of this stuff about the energy shortfall in Europe. Not only is it potentially going to cause these blackouts and you have to have candles and canned food and water, a disaster readiness plan essentially for normal times, but it's causing an economic depression, in that all of these businesses can't compete and they're moving out. But it gets worse, because it says there is, however, a bigger problem than all these would constitute for their respective industries. Fertilizer makers are also shutting down their plants, and fertilizer imports are down because the biggest suppliers of fertilizers for Europe were Russia and Belarus, both currently under sanctions. Both countries have retaliated against the sanctions by cutting off exports of fertilizers to Europe and European officials repeating that fertilizer exports are not sanctioned is not really helping. So, surprise, surprise, politicians saying, "Hey, wait, we we want to sanction Russia. We want to sanction Russia and hurt them, but please send oil and fertilizer and other essential supplies our way. We don't sanction those." Surprisingly, that hasn't worked. Russia has said, no, they're not sending those things. And we've talked before about these politicians think that they can legislate or talk, and it will magically make energy appear, food appear, all these things appear. But it's not. It's just making the problem worse because of these poor decisions that they've made. They've become dependent on Russia for energy, dependent on Russia for fertilizer. What are the two things that are really most essential to survival? Well, food and energy along with water. and they've made themselves beholden to Russia and reliant on Russia. And now they're facing the consequences of that, and facing the consequences of their rash decision to immediately go out and sanction and attack over the war in Ukraine when they really weren't in a position to do that. And now we're seeing the consequences of this. And this is particularly a problem in the UK. So we read here, this is from Zero Hedge. It says, British supermarkets start to ration eggs. Major supermarket chains, Asda and Lidl, have started to ration the number of boxes of eggs customers can buy, owing to supply chain issues. Both stores said the measure is temporary and because of avian flu, which has disrupted the supply of some egg ranges. Waitrose said it had not introduced any limits but was, quote, continuing to monitor customer demand. Other major retailers, including Tesco, Morrison's, Marks & Spencer, and Co-op, said they were not limiting sales. Sainsbury is stocking eggs imported from Italy. Last week, the government said that the UK is facing its largest ever outbreak of bird flu, with over 200 cases confirmed across the country since late October 2021. Now here we go. It says, while acknowledging bird flu, poultry farmers say that energy costs and retailers buying produce at low prices are now tightening the supply of eggs. So they're trying to push this idea, the grocery stores are pushing this idea that this is because of the avian flu. We had a big outbreak last year, early part of this year. We didn't see these supply disruptions. But again, head to the bottom of the story where we will see the lead buried. And here we have the real reason that they hinted at the very end of that opening. It says, supermarkets source the vast majority of their food from the UK and know they need to pay a sustainable price to egg farmers, but are constrained by how much additional costs they can pass on to consumers during a cost of living crisis. So it's not shortages due to avian flu. This is telling us what's happening is it's cost more to produce the eggs, for the farmers to produce the eggs, and the supermarkets are not offering a higher price to the farmers for those eggs because they aren't able to pass those higher prices on to consumers who are being bitten by inflation as well. So really, this is an inflation problem. And again, it starts with this shortfall of energy. It is rippling through the economy, and it's going to lead to a shortage of eggs until demand goes up enough that people are willing to pay higher prices and the supermarket's willing to pay the farmer higher prices. Because farmers cannot create an endless amount of eggs and crops at a loss. They just can't do that. It's not sustainable. So that's what it means when they say they need to pay a sustainable price. They need to pay a price that covers the cost of creating the egg to begin with. And they can't do that with these higher energy prices. And they can't do that unless customers have the ability, as well as the demand, the desire to pay those higher prices in order to get it. The only way that's going to come is through shortfalls, through shortages of those eggs. So we're going to see this not just with eggs, but other foods as well. And all of this, again, comes from energy. So we look at this oilprice.com article. It says UK citizens pay the highest electricity bills in the world. New research reveals that the UK has the highest electricity bills. Brits pay more for their power than anywhere else on the planet. A new study looked at government data on electricity and gas prices from the past 5 years to analyze the impact of the worsening cost of living crisis and discover which countries have had the biggest year-on-year increase in energy prices. We go down and we see that that would be the United Kingdom right at the top. We see outside of Japan and Australia, it's all European countries. So the shortfall of European energy is rippling through to industry, households, food production, everything. And we see, again, the UK is being hit particularly hard. And we see that with this Guardian article, UK restaurants going bankrupt at a faster rate than during COVID. UK restaurants are going bust at a faster rate than during the COVID crisis, owing to a toxic mix of surging energy cost, staff shortages, and falling bookings. Closures in the sector rose by 60%, with 1,567 insolvencies over a year ago prior. Insolvencies of restaurant businesses are now happening at a faster rate than during COVID. Rebecca Docker, a partner at Mazars, said, "It is a very toxic mix of rising input cost, sharply rising finance cost, and weak demand. Most restaurateurs have not seen this combination of negative factors before." So think about that. You've got rising food cost, rising input costs, labor issues, you have financing costs because of rising interest rates, and then you have weak demand because your customers, your clients, are getting squeezed from all sides by inflation and they don't want to go out to eat. So it's a very tough environment if you're running a restaurant. It says industry lobby groups, including UK Hospitality and the British Beer and Pub Association, said last month that more than a third of hospitality businesses could go bust by early 2023. A third of hospitality businesses. While the industry experienced a rebound in business this summer after a string of forced closures during lockdown periods, restaurants are now struggling with surging inflation, which has not only increased the cost of energy, food, and drinks, but meant their customers have less money to spend on going out. So we talked before about how this energy shortfall is going to hammer the European economy and send it into a depression. And we're starting to see that when they're talking about a third of hospitality businesses going out of business in early 2023, which is right around the corner. It's just a few weeks away from 2023. And we see the surge in restaurants declaring bankruptcy. And then we scroll down toward the bottom here, and we read this line. It says there's a certainty of further insolvencies if they don't receive much more support from the government. But the chances of the government fully turning on the taps is low. Again, we've talked about this numerous times. The government turning on the taps, what does that mean? Well, it would be nice if it meant turning on the energy taps, if they had that ability, which they don't. But what they're talking about here is subsidizing, supporting through currency printing. Print some currency, hand it out to these businesses, hand it out to the consumers. That does not solve the problem. That would create more of an inflation problem. But I can tell you what the government solution is going to be. They're telling us, they have been telling us, and they tell us right here in this article. This is from Markets Insider. It says UK may need digital pound, Bank of England's John Cunliffe says. And of course, a digital pound, taking currency from paper or ones and zeros on a computer screen to these central bank digital currencies, it isn't going to solve the problem. The problem is an energy shortfall. The problem is sanctions and lack of free trade. But they're going to come in and claim the solution is central bank digital currencies because it gives them greater control. So we read on, it says, John Cunliffe, Deputy Governor at the Bank of England, said the UK may need a digital British pound as he discussed whether the collapse of crypto exchange FTX would influence the country's decision to issue a government-controlled digital currency. Although he initially thought, again, where do we see this? He initially thought there was no connection between the FTX debacle and the central bank's work on a central bank digital currency. Cunliffe said on Monday that he understands the concerns. What did we say when FTX collapsed? They are going to seize this moment to claim we need to regulate all of cryptocurrency. You need a safe cryptocurrency that you can rely on. And what are they going to claim as safe? Well, one that the government controls, one that the government regulates, one that the government guarantees. And it's going to be their central bank digital currency. And they're going to push away anything that's decentralized, anything that's private, anything that they don't control, all under the guise of protecting people. So we read on, it says, over the past few days, I've had a few comments, both to the effect that the collapse of FTX shows that we need to get on and issue a digitally native pound, and to the effect that FTX shows that we do not need to do so, Cunliffe said. FTX in particular is emblematic of these new technologies and the possibility that they might revolutionize financial services and the forms that money takes. So how would this revolutionize it? Well, I can tell you right now, they're looking at FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried and going, wow, look at all the money he was able to steal from people. Just think if we had that power and control, how much we could steal from our people. We could really steal from them then. We wouldn't have to use inflation alone to steal or taxation. We could just seize their accounts. That's what they're thinking. They may not say that in public, but that's what they're thinking. Sam Bankman-Fried's multi-billion-dollar crypto enterprise filed for bankruptcy in the U.S. on November 11th after a liquidity crunch set off by a CoinDesk article led to its collapse. Well, and the fact that there was massive fraud going on, it was going to collapse whether an article had been written or not. It's just a matter of time. It says on Monday, Cunliffe said that crypto needs to be regulated in the UK. Why? To protect consumers and investors, ensure financial stability, and enable innovation. Cunliffe has previously called for existing financial regulations to be extended to cover crypto. Legislation now being considered in Parliament would set up regulations for crypto as financial instruments and give UK regulators, including the Bank of England, more control over the sector. That's what it's all about, guys. If the bill becomes law, the Bank of England would regulate firms that issue stable coins, which are digital tokens whose value is pegged to stable assets like the US dollar. Well, I would argue that the US dollar is a stable asset. Anyone who's seen their purchasing power erode over the past year, over the past 50 years, knows that the US dollar is not a stable asset. But anyway, the article goes on. It says, the central bank will kick off a consultation on stablecoins next year that will look at the requirements for corporate structure, governance, accountability, and transparency necessary to meet the standards expected in other parts of the financial system. The FTX example underlines how important these aspects are. The Bank of England has also been exploring issuing a digital pound. Its work on a digitally native pound is driven by trends in payments, including reducing the role of cash and more generally an increasing digitization of daily life. Or, let's say they're not exploring, because they always talk about this, we're exploring or we don't intend to, just like last week we read about the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. They said we're launching this test of digital currency and we don't intend to do anything with it. We don't intend to find out how we might structure such a digital currency. There's really no reason we're doing this. And then a year from now we'll read, hey, it's rolling out. And the same thing's happening here. They're talking about we're exploring this issue. What do they want to do? Well, they want to reduce the role of cash, right? Why? Because cash is private. You can pass that to another party without the government knowing what's going on, without the government having any control. It gives people more freedom when they have cash, and generally an increasing digitalization of daily life. Again, what does that mean? Well, that means the government having control, the government peering into every transaction you undertake, everything you do, everywhere you go, every aspect of your daily life. That's what the digitalization of daily life means. It means they've got you. So, and if there's any doubt about that, and that this is all setting the stage for the mark of the beast and the mark of the beast system to come into place in the end times during the tribulation, then we get this other article from Zero Hedge, and I'm going to have to be really careful and speak in code on this one. Just keep the big tech censors away, but this says G20 pushes, I'm going to call it special passports for all future international travel. The G20 has issued a formal decree promoting special passports as preparation for any future pandemic response. Indonesian health minister, speaking on the matter on behalf of the G20 host country, had earlier in the summit called for a digital wellness certificate using World Health Organization standards. He advocated for what he dubbed a digital health certificate, which shows whether a person has been medicated or tested properly, so that only then can you move around. Right? And they show this video of it. So if you don't have said special passport, you aren't going to be able to move around, meaning you're essentially going to be under house arrest or arrest, however you want to call it. And then we go on, we read, there's more. This tweet says, G20 breaking. Leaders have just signed a declaration which states that special passports will be adopted to facilitate all international travel. This means any medication the WHO determines you should have, changing your rights and freedoms forever, silence from the media. Is it any surprise? As they just take over people's rights. But it goes on. They want to do more than just restrict your travel and your ability to move, right? As they would call it. It says Article 24 of the final G20 declaration begins, the pandemic has accelerated the transformation of the digital ecosystem and digital economy. And then it leads into the following statement. We acknowledge the importance to counter disinformation campaigns, cyber threats, online abuse, and ensuring security and connectivity infrastructure. In other words, not only do we want to restrict your ability to move, but we want to shut you up too. You better not say what we don't want you to say. Otherwise, we want the ability to cut that off, to censor you, to make sure that you can't do that. Just as we want the ability to restrict your right to get on an airplane or to cross a border or to leave your house, we want to restrict your ability to speak in public or to get your message out. Any doubt about that? Remember I think it was earlier this year. If not, it was the end of last year. This is from Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister in New Zealand. She said, unless you hear it from us, meaning the government, it is not the truth. Dismiss anything else. We will continue to be your single source of truth. So guys, this is what they want. They want special passports. They want these social credit scoring systems. They want the digitization of life, as it said in the last article, because that gives them complete and utter control over every aspect of your life and gives them power that can't be messed with. And what does the Bible tell us? Right? What does the Bible say? It says in Revelation, who can make war against the beast? Right? Who can stand against him? It says that those who didn't receive the mark could neither buy or sell. So we're seeing the system, we're seeing the technology that would underlie such a system coming into place and creating the foundation for the mark of the beast system as we speak, right now, here and now, in our day and time. That doesn't mean the mark of the beast exists right now or that it's one of these things, but it means that for that to come, this has to take place first. We have to see this foundation laid, and we are seeing it laid. How many different articles have we gone over talking about these things? So guys, what do you think? Are you going to get one of the special passports, right? Are you going to go out and trade in all of your cash for a digital pound, a digital native pound? Or are you looking forward to Macron's single global order where everybody sings Kumbaya and everybody's happy? If so, let me know in the comments down below. But this all just sets the stage for the end times, the prophecies all the Bible has been telling us about. We know we live in the season of the Lord's return. Jesus said, when you see all of these things converge, you know that I'm right at the door, and we are seeing them converge. We see calls for global government. We see conditions in Europe which create an environment that should lead to social upheaval and political upheaval that may lead to the rise of the person the Bible tells us will rule the entire earth one day. We see this push for this mark of the beast system everywhere we turn through this merger of government and corporate power, of QR codes and iris scans and everything you can think of, the digitalization of daily life, just as they said, so that there is no escape for people who are part of that, and they're going to force everyone to be a part of that. So guys, we live in the season of the Lord's return, but the good news is that means Jesus is coming back. So Jesus is the source of our hope, so don't let any of this news bring you down. He's coming back. So make sure to like and share this. God willing, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to sign up for my free monthly newsletter and get your copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Just follow the link in the description to get your free book. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.